I don't really know how it ties into it, but just looking at these figures, 51% of Americans say it's more important to control gun ownership, and 45% of
basically half and half.
that they want to protect gun rights. I can make the argument that controlling gun, I know that they're very unique numbers, but I can make the argument that controlling gun ownership falls within the spectrum of protecting gun rights. Because if I want to say, I want to...
We're going to hear what the Supreme Court says in a minute. Let's not run ahead of ourselves. So, let's see what the law of the land is. What is the actual law? So we know that some time ago, about 10, 12 years ago, there was a famous case of D.C. versus Heller. The laws in D.C. were that you were not allowed to own a gun if it wasn't registered, I believe, before 1976, which made it was a great restriction. Basically, no one could own guns if it wasn't registered before that date. The law was passed in 1975. You had to register all guns by then, and if you wasn't registered by then, you could not own the gun, was illegal. And on top of that, that you couldn't carry the gun anywhere without a license. You had to have a license in order to have the gun anywhere, even in your home. So that was the law. Furthermore, even when someone had such a license, an additional measure required that all firearms be stored unloaded, disassembled, or bound by a trigger lock or other similar device. These were the strictest gun laws in the country, in Washington, D.C. In 2004, a man by the name of Dick Heller, along with a bunch of other guys with him, you know this, a little bit about this, he sued the city of D.C. and he filed a lawsuit, and it went to court. Based on the Second Amendment, he felt that this was an infringement on the Second Amendment. What does the Second Amendment read? You can see it in text number 2, which reads as follows. A well-regulated militia, you have in your copies. A well-regulated militia, you see it? Text 2. Being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And that is a loosely written amendment. It's not clear what this means and how to read it. So they said, Heller and the company said, that these laws are an infringement and they go against our Second Amendment rights. Because with all these restrictions, the effect of the weapon is no effect. It's unloaded. You can't. The court dismissed their complaint and said, interpreted the Second Amendment that nowhere in the Second Amendment does it say that a person, every individual, has the right to own a gun. It's for militia, not for regular people. They took it to the next, let's see what it says over here. In text number 3, Carl.
This court is not persuaded that a well-regulated militia means each body or person separate and apart from his or her enrollment or association with the militia. As the 11th Circuit in the plain meaning of the Second Amendment makes clear, a militia must not be a free-for-all. Rather, a militia must be a well-regulated fighting force, implying at the very least some semblance of organization at the state level.
Very good. They took it to the appeals court. The appeals court argued and overturned the lower court's opinion, and they said that they ruled that Heller was correct. The lower court asked for a hearing in the full court. They denied it, so they went to the Supreme Court of the United States. And in June 26 of 2008, they ruled that they upheld the appeals court ruling and that Heller was right. And they basically got rid of those restrictive laws. Antonin Scalia wrote the majority opinion. I will read a few sections so you get the flavor, and then we'll move on to our own text, to our own sources. Text number 4a is out of Justice Antonin Scalia's opinion. Josh, want to read it?
The Second Amendment is naturally divided into two parts, its prefatory clause and its operative clause. The former does not limit the latter grammatically, but rather announces a purpose. The amendment could be rephrased, because a well-regulated militia is necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
You get that, right? You understood what he did, the distinction, he separated the two clauses. Fine. Scalia explains further. Go ahead, read further. The next one. We reach
the question then, does the preface fit with an operative clause that creates an individual right to keep and bear arms? It fits perfectly, once one knows the history that the founding generation knew and that we have described above. That history shows that the way tyrants had eliminated a militia consisting of all the able-bodied men was not by banning the militia, but simply by taking away the people's arms, enabling a select militia or standing army to suppress political opponents. This is what had occurred in England that prompted codification of the right to have arms in the English Bill of Rights. The debate with respect to the right to keep and bear arms, as with other guarantees in the Bill of Rights, was not over whether it was desirable, all agreed that it was, but over whether it needed to be codified in the Constitution. During the 1788 ratification debates, the fear that the federal government would disarm the people in order to impose rule through a standing army or select militia was pervasive in anti-federalist rhetoric. Federalists responded that because Congress was given no power to abridge the ancient right of individuals to keep and bear arms, such a force could never oppress the people. It was understood across the political spectrum that the right helped to secure the ideal of citizen militia, which might be necessary to oppose an oppressive military force if the constitutional order broke down. It is therefore entirely sensible that the Second Amendment's prefatory clause announces the purpose for which the right was codified, to prevent elimination of the militia. The prefatory clause does not suggest that preserving the militia was the only reason Americans valued the ancient right. Most undoubtedly thought it even more important for self-defense and hunting. But the threat that the new federal government would destroy the citizens' militia by taking away their arms was the reason that right, unlike some other English rights, was codified in the written Constitution.
But he said that he didn't say that it's, in other words, that there can't be any kind of clause that protect against certain, in other words, not a free, without any restriction. For example, he said there could be bans on that there should be concealed weapons, and you shouldn't be able to sell it to people who are felons, people that are mentally ill. It shouldn't be to restrict it not to have in certain places like schools and federal buildings or things like that. He didn't say that there should be no restriction at all. In other words, he didn't say that because when he wrote there should be. He also writes that even though today people say that, and you hear this all the time for the people that propose restrictions and war laws, they say that this thought that there's going to be the federal government will oppress the society is so far-fetched and it's like loony if you believe it. Okay, so that's what he says. That's not a reason for the high court. This is not our job. No, it wasn't our job to change the Second Amendment. That's not what we were asked to do. We were asked to interpret the Second Amendment, not to change it. If you want to say that there's no need for a Second Amendment anymore, then there has to be the system of ratification, how to change the amendment. But that's not the High Court's position. They wrote what was brought before them, which is to interpret this question about the Second Amendment. Now, there was a dissent, of course. Stevens wrote in his dissent a very, very strong worded dissent. Now, let's read a couple of chapters from it, and then we'll be done with this part. He did interpret the Second Amendment as meaning only a militia. Therefore, he said it was a stretch to have that every individual should be able to hold a gun. There's no such right. And he said, therefore, that the Congress should not have limits on what it can legislate regarding gun law. You want to read this text number 5A?
The Second Amendment was adopted to protect the right of the people of each of the several states to maintain a well-regulated militia. It was a response to concerns raised during the ratification of the Constitution that the powers of Congress to disarm the state militias and create a national standing army pose as intolerable threat to the sovereignty of the several states. Neither the text of the amendment nor the arguments advanced by its proponents evidence the slightest interest in limiting any legislator's authority to regulate private citizens' use of firearms. Specifically, there is no indication that the framers of the amendment, intended to enshrine the common law right to self-defense in the Constitution. The opinion of the court announced today fails to identify any new evidence supporting the view that the amendment was intended to limit the power of Congress to regulate civilian use of weapons. Unable to point to any such evidence, the court states its holding on a strained and unpersuasive reading of the amendment's text.
Basically, that it's only for militia, it's not for the private individual, and therefore, he totally disagreed with Scalias and the majority's opinion. We will read two more sections. Want to read the next two?
The court would have us believe that over 200 years ago, the framers made a choice to limit the tools available to elected officials wishing to regulate civilian uses of weapons and to use the common law process of case-by-case judicial lawmaking to define the contours of acceptable gun control policy. Absent compelling evidence that is nowhere to be found in the court's opinion, I could not possibly conclude that the framers made such a choice.
To regulate Congress, that they can't legislate and restrict and so on.
Colonial history
One
itself.
second. The next section that you're going to read, which is the final one, is from Justice Breyer. He wrote a separate dissent, and he added that even if the amendment, the Second Amendment, did apply to the individual, the limitations they put and the restrictions and the restrictions and the control to have gun control laws is not restricted in the Second Amendment whatsoever. Go ahead.
Colonial history itself offers important examples of the kinds of gun regulation that citizens would then have thought compatible with the right to keep and bear arms, whether embodied in federal or state constitutions or the background common law. And those examples include substantial regulation of firearms in urban areas, including regulations that impose obstacles to the use of firearms for the protection of the home. Several towns and cities, including Philadelphia, New York, and Boston, regulated for fire safety reasons the storage of gunpowder, a necessary component of an operational firearm. Boston's law in particular impacted the use of firearms in the home very much as the district's law does today. Boston's gunpowder law imposed a fine upon any person who shall take into any dwelling house, stable, barn, outhouse, warehouse, store, shop, or other building within the town of Boston any firearm loaded with or having gunpowder.
And there was one more.
The fact that the fact that important interests lie on both sides of the constitutional equation suggests that review of gun control regulation is not a context in which a court should effectively presume either constitutionality as in rational basis review, or unconstitutionality, as in strict scrutiny. Rather, where a law significantly implicates competing constitutionally protected interests in complex ways, the court generally asks whether the statute burdens a protected interest in a way or to an extent that it is out of proportion to the statute's salutary effects upon other important governmental interests.
What he's saying basically is that sometimes you have two conflicting rights. The right to bear arms, the right to feel safe. These are two conflicting rights. So you have to sometimes be reasonable in legislating, and the Congress is there to decide which is more important at a given time. And therefore to say that they have no right to legislate, to restrict and put laws in place to restrict it, to make it safer, trigger locks, whatever it may be, unreasonable. You have to, therefore, you suggest that the Congress should sit and delve into this and understand and make proper laws to figure out when it is necessary and when it is not, when you can restrict. Although the law of the land became as just, as the majority was, that the Heller won that case, but nevertheless the dissent wrote what it wrote, and both opinions were just explained. Okay. Having framed it this, now that we understand our basis of basically what the issues are, let's go into the Torah sources and see what we can glean from the Torah. So the first thing I want to establish is, does the Congress have the right to legislate and restrict gun laws? Do they even have such a right? To tell me what to do?
Sure.
Let's see what
without amending the Constitution.
we're talking about without amending it. Yeah, they can't amend it. Well, they could if they have some kind of majority. I don't know how they do that. 3/5. All right. In other words, they can restrict. Does the government have the question is like this, does the government have the right to restrict my rights? That's the question.
Of course.
They use different types.
Because they make you wear a seatbelt, there are certain things that
Do they have that right? That's a good question.
for safety of the
I don't want to wear a seatbelt. I want to kill myself. I'll kill myself. Boy, you
That's
tell me what
against
to
the
do.
law.
This is a very serious question. Does the government have a right to tell me what to do? If I don't, if I'm not a danger to someone else, do they have a right to tell me? Okay. So let's see let's see, first of all, let's see that. But then we'll see if they have the right to legislate a specific law. The first thing we see from the coming text is that we don't find in the Talmud any restriction on the government to legislate law. The Torah is very, very permissive. Gives a great power to the government, to the Sanhedrin, to the Jewish government, and even to non-Jewish governments to legislate laws that put certain restrictions on people. Let's take a look. Text number 7, Jonathan. I'm sorry, article 7. This is out of the book of Maimonides.
English, not Hebrew, right?
Yeah, the English, of course.
According to the laws which they shall instruct you, this refers to the edicts, decrees, and customs that they instruct people to observe to strengthen Judaism and improve society. When a court sees it necessary to issue a decree, institute an edict, or establish a custom, they must first contemplate the matter and see whether or not the majority of the community can uphold the practice. We never issue a decree on the community unless the majority of the community can uphold the practice.
So basically, they have the right to legislate law to uphold Judaism, the laws of Judaism, to uphold whatever it is that they want for the betterment of society. There's one restriction that's mentioned here, that you have to make sure that this law is not too overwhelming to the people, that they can live by it. And there were laws that were instituted in the history of the Jewish people by the Sanhedrin that were then abolished because they saw within no time that the majority could not live by it. They couldn't live by it. There's examples. But outside of that, it seems clear that the Torah gives permission for the government and even non-Jewish governments, if we live under the rule of a non-Jewish government, there's a concept in Torah called Dina de Malchus Dina, which means that the law of the land is binding on Jews. It becomes the Torah law as well, if it doesn't contradict a Torah law.
Right.
You understand that for sure, obviously. But if it doesn't contradict, like the seatbelt, if the government says you must wear a seatbelt, a Jew becomes religiously obligated to do so. Dina de Malchus Dina. It becomes God's will to you to do that. And you're not allowed to violate, okay? That doesn't mean that they should restrict. It doesn't mean that it just means they're allowed, okay? The question now is, regarding this particular law, is it advisable, according to the Torah, for the government to allow free purchase of arms, or is it advisable to them to restrict it and put more gun laws and so on and so forth? And that's what we're going to now delve into. We're going to talk about a number, I think 8 sources within the Jewish Talmud, within the Talmud and the codes of Jewish law, and they're all going to be related to the issue of gun laws. Weaponry on Shabbos, on Shabbat. So the Jewish court has the power to legislate Jewish community representatives also. There was, in the Jewish communities, there was something called the Shiva Tuvei Aliyah, which means that the 7 members of the community now had the council of the community, and they had autonomy. It was like a governing body that the non-Jewish larger government gave the Jews some kind of autonomy to govern their own lives within the shtetl and the towns. And they had halachically tremendous power, and they were able to legislate law as well. So not just the high court, but even the representatives of the community. And the same thing with non-Jewish governments, as I just mentioned, Dina de Malchus Dina. Okay. On Shabbos, a Jew is not allowed to carry 4 cubits in a public domain. Okay, you know that, right? We're not allowed to carry, that's why we have the Eruv, right? To allow us to carry. But without an Eruv, a Jew is not allowed to carry from inside to outside, or even outside itself, to pick up a ball in the public domain and walk with it 4 cubits, which is about 6 feet. You violated the Shabbos if you do that. You're not allowed to carry on Shabbos. But, obviously, does that mean that when I wear my clothing, when I walk outside, I'm carrying my clothing? Is that called carrying? No, it's carrying. I'm carrying my shirt, my undershirt. I'm carrying. But the law, of course, is that thankfully, is that it's not considered carrying. Garments and clothing is not carrying. It's part of the person. It becomes part of the person. How about jewelry? Wear a ring, wear a necklace. Also, no, that's...
You're wearing it, so it should be.
Oh, so ornaments and jewelry is not considered carrying because it's like an ornament. It's part. It becomes like a lavush, becomes like a garment, and you're allowed to walk out with jewelry on Shabbos. There are restrictions with that. There's certain jewelry that people have the tendency to take off and show to their... Did you see this beautiful ring that I got? Looking at before they know they're walking, before they put it back on. I'll tell you, so those things, the rabbis say, such jewelry that you'll show off to your friends, you'll meet someone in the middle, he's walking home from his Shabbos meal, and you meet in the street and say, look what my husband just bought, and look what my wife just bought, and you take it off. Before you know it, you'll carry it. So they're restricted that. But generally speaking, jewelry is an ornament. Ornaments are permitted to be carried. The question now became, what about armor? Weaponry. Is a person allowed to carry weaponry on Shabbos? Armor, shields, in those days they used to walk around with these things. Whatever it was. So that's the issue right now that's on the table. Let's read the following text with a partner and then discuss the question that's followed. So let's read it together. It's text number 8. And this is a Mishnah. How about it, Linda?
One may not go out wearing a sword, a bow, a triangle, or a round shield, or a spear. Rabbi Eliezer says that they are ornaments to the wearer.
And therefore they're allowed to. He says you're allowed to wear them because they're like ornaments, like jewelry. It's a nice thing. It's a...
Not.
They are ornaments to their wearer.
You can't wear them.
I mean,
Where do you see that?
one may not
I'm
go
saying what Rabbi Lezer says.
Yeah, but-
Rabbi Lezer is arguing.
He's arguing.
He's of dissent. He is a different opinion. says they are ornaments, and therefore you're allowed to wear them. Go further.
But the sages say they are nothing but a stigma, for it is written, Isaiah 2:4, Micah 4:3. They shall beat the swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning knives. Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation, and neither shall they learn war anymore.
Okay, so here's the situation. Let me just let's look on the wall. The wall may not carry 4 cubits in a public domain. Clothing and ornaments are not considered carrying. Are guns considered ornaments? Spear, a sword, a gun, are these considered ornaments? Well, it depends who you ask. Rabbi Eliezer says that they are considered ornaments. The sages hold that they're not considered ornaments. How do we know? Why do the sages say they're not ornaments? And they're not considered like jewelry? Because the verse says that when the Mashiach comes, we're going to beat our swords into plowshares, which means that the utopian era when Mashiach comes, the, weaponry and things like that are going to be null and void. We're not going to need them anymore. Therefore, even now, it's like it's not an ornament. It's certainly something that is only there to fight and to shed blood. And therefore, we're not proud of it. It's nothing to write home about. And if you need it in the weekday, because you have to, if you want to wear it in the weekday, go right ahead. But on Shabbos, it's not an ornament. Let's not hang it up in our living room.
What about self-defense?
Self-defense is something else. So wait a minute, before you run, the halacha is like the chacham. This halacha follows the sages that you're not allowed to carry them on Shabbos because they're not ornaments. They're considered a stigma because even the verse the prophet says one day we're not going to have it at all. We're going to destroy them and turn them into plowshares. Let's have now a discussion. What do you get from this? Does this seem to be?
What if the firearm is concealed and it's not?
What if you're wearing it?
What do you mean?
If
If it's concealed and it's
Now for sure it's not an ornament.
right.
Yeah. He's saying even if it's open, in the open, you're wearing it proudly, you're walking with it, it's also not an ornament.
Pearl handles.
The halacha holds that nothing, they're not considered ornaments, you're not allowed to carry them. Even if it's public, not if it's concealed. So for sure it's concealed. If it's concealed, it's certainly not an ornament. So you're not allowed to carry on Shabbos weapons. What do you think, could this give us any hint to the law of the gun law? Let's have that discussion for 2 minutes. What do you think? So Rabbi Eliezer says it's a great honor. The Sage says it's not a great honor. Look at the pictures.
Rabbi, what about a police officer who's bound to carry when he's not on duty?
Yeah.
Is he allowed to carry on Shabbos? He's bound to do so.
Police officer not on duty has to carry his gun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not on duty. That's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Good.
But in
Yeah.
some places.
I didn't
Yeah.
know.
And but they usually carry that concealed.
Right. Yeah, but they still carry it.
But
That's
it's
what I'm
concealed,
asking.
it's okay.
No.
Concealed is not okay.
It's even worse. It's even worse than
It's
that.
not clothing. Question is it?
Is it considered like a jewelry, like a piece of jewelry? If you took off your ring and you put it in your pocket, would you be allowed to walk with it in the street? For sure not. Only if it's on your finger and it's being serving as a piece of jewelry. So a concealed weapon would be like taking your ring off and putting it in your pocket. For sure you're not going to do that. The question is like this picture on the left.
Now this is
That's,
obviously,
that could be an honor.
the Kiss of Shabbos is obviously talking about when it's not needed for
Right. That's
self-protection.
obviously if there's a war and there's a serious threat to your safety, then you're allowed to carry because you're allowed to violate all the laws of Shabbos. If there's a situation of sakonis, or if there's a pikuach nefesh, if there's a threat to your life, then there's not a question. The question is if there's no threat.
So sometimes those are not exactly planned.
Exactly, you know what?
That's why.
So you're
So how do you
saying,
know?
wait a
How do you
minute.
know?
Exactly.
So not every day you're in war, right? The military in Israel, they carry weapons.
That's different.
On Shabbos,
Right.
they're not at war. That day, they may not fire their weapon that day.
That's in Jerusalem, not a soldier in.
So first of all, I'm not sure every Jew is allowed to walk around with a weapon on Shabbos in Jerusalem. Who said they are? I'm not sure you're allowed.
Well, the one's on duty for sure.
When the soldiers on duty, maybe, yeah, but I'm talking
But it
about
would be-
soldiers.
it would be wonderful to leave my house every day and say, my life is never in jeopardy every day.
But you're stretching it. In other words, say that I'm allowed to walk on Shabbos on Indian trace because maybe someone will come and threaten me. How often does it happen that someone's threatened on Indian trace?
It's case by case.
But the point is, the question is, could we learn from this any kind of hint to gun laws? Let's go step by step.
Of course.
Well, let's see what. Tell us what.
Well, if we go to sages, it would be pro-restriction.
Because why?
Because you shouldn't be carrying it, because there's no threat to your life. We don't need it. Mashiach is going to be here. We're certainly not going to need it then. So, yeah, of course there should be restriction.
But he's saying on Shabbat.
No, forget Shabbat. They're
Don't
good.
forget.
I can make the argument that if you have to prohibit it on Shabbos, that means that during the week it was a very common thing that Jews wore armed weapons. And that teaches that hey, don't restrict people. On Shabbos, yeah, but not on Monday, on Tuesday, and Wednesday. I have a right to have arms. You can learn from this, on the contrary, that you should not restrict them. On Shabbos, you have the Torah tells you you're not allowed to carry it. Sorry, you can't carry a weapon. But doesn't mean you can't have it in your closet.
Back then also.
On the contrary, this may teach us that pro-NRA, the NRA will raise this to halacha and say we're right. Yeah.
Back then,
There's another way to look at it.
the
also.
weapons were knives, pretty much. It was a
Yeah,
sword.
swords.
So where are you going to draw the line? You have a butcher's knife in your house that you're allowed to carry, and then suddenly, if it's
You're not allowed to carry it.
Spears. The butcher's knife is something
I
else.
understand
Not
what I'm saying
carry
is
anything on Shabbat.
the
But
difference
you're not allowed to
between
carry that on Shabbos either.
no, nothing to do with Shabbos, but the difference between a weapon then and what people had in their house anyway was a lot smaller than a gun and a knife.
Well, I
A
don't
gun,
think
you don't need to have a license. A knife, you don't need a license to carry a knife. A gun is where you do need.
Depends on what your intent.
Over 6 inches.
Why should you don't need a license to have a gun? That's not true.
I'm looking to carry.
I'm not talking about carrying. I'm talking about hey, there's a lot of detail. I'm talking about general concept. Do we glean from this statement that the sages had a problem with people, regular citizens, owning weapons? It would seem to me that no. This would seem that they have no problem with Jews owning, with people owning weapons. Right. Seems that they have no problem with them. Yeah.
So according to the Jews, you're not supposed to have war on Saturday. On
Well,
Shabbat.
you can't choose when the war happens. That happened exactly.
Well, maybe the Bible
However,
says that.
however,
They
you do
didn't go by the Bible.
However, let's move on, it's getting late, I don't want to waste time. However, for the sages, we do see that they don't like the whole idea of weaponry as a stigma. One day we hope for the day that we don't have to have, that we can shred them into plowshares.
Well, going
So
back.
that's, in other words, you have people today, so you can argue from this, that if you need a gun for self-defense, fine. But if just to have 100 guns in your house, you have a collection, and you have, this rifle, and that, maybe they see it as a stigma. It could be that would go against the spirit of Jewish view of weapons, which is that it's a negative. So you can see it one way, you can see it the other. Maybe there's somewhere in the middle. Maybe one weapon, yeah, a collection, not, So you get from here, but certainly you can't come to the conclusion that just because the rabbis see it as a stigma means you can't have weapons. No, that's for sure not. Because you see from it that they, only on Shabbos they prohibited it.
But you have to look at what was going on in those years. Life was
That's
different.
also true, you can argue that.
Life was
Maybe in the
different.
times
They didn't have
they
They didn't have radical
Let's
Islam.
move on to the next thing. The Philistines. Let's talk about the story of the Philistines. Let's read it, let's see if we can get something from there. Times of Saul, the first king of the Jewish people, they had to go to war against the Philistines and get the Philistines were in control of the Jewish people at the time. In Israel, they controlled the Jews, a large part of it, and Saul felt that he had to get rid of this problem once and for all. He went to war against the Philistines, but there was a big problem, as we will now see in text number 9.
There was no blacksmith to be found in all of the land of Israel, because the Philistines said, lest the Hebrews make swords or spears. All of the Israelites went down to the Philistines to sharpen their plowshares, picks, axes, and sickles. So on the day of the battle, neither sword nor spear was found in the hands of any of the people who were with Saul and Jonathan, his son, did have weapons.
What do you get from this?
There's gun restrictions.
Amazing.
There's gun restrictions.
They
right
didn't
there.
even let you have
Right.
smiths to make weapons. Forget about it. You couldn't have any metal, period.
So if they were the law of the land at that time, they were...
That was the law of the land. They were the Philistines. So maybe this is, however, on the other hand, you can argue, no, wait a minute. This was one of the reasons why Saul went to war against the Philistines, to throw over this oppressive government. The Philistines were not the United States of America of 2016. They were seen as an oppressive government for which the Jews rose up against them and to get rid of them. So this may be the greatest proof to the NRA who says you should not have restrictions. Because if you have restrictions, what happens? The Jews don't have weaponry, and they can be then overthrown and lose the war against the Philistines, which they did. Saul, and that they ended up getting killed. If not for David, which killed Goliath, then it would have been a disaster. I think that it was even later. Sorry, this was even later. This was later. This was after the story of David and Goliath. But the point is that no one had arms. And what did the Philistines took advantage of that? So you can say, wait a minute, this was the din of the Malchus Adina, like you just tried to say. On the other hand, you can say, no, they fought against this. Shaul HaMelech was the righteous king. He fought against this, which means restrictions are terrible. So you can go both ways with this as well. In other words, let me take this one. In other words, from the fact that Saul went against the Philistines shows that restriction is no good. However, you can argue another point. When are restrictions no good? When you have Philistines, which are an oppressive government, and they use it to oppress the people. That's why they don't let them have guns. However, when you have a Malchus Shel Chesed, a kind government like ours, like the United States of America, which are a government that has its law, it's a normal society, and not looking to hurt anyone, you can argue that they should have the right to restrict. Could be, yeah.
A good government could be a bad government.
So we have the right, we have elections every 4 years. Well, that's an argument. We'll see that. So I'll say that. But Nazi Germany, right? But we are not Nazi Germany. You mean they became Nazi?
Neither were they.
They were indeed in the beginning. Yeah. Right. So yeah, you're right. There's an argument like that. But I'm saying from this text, you can't learn yet that restriction is not a good thing. A restriction for Philistines is not a good thing. For Hitler, it was a terrible thing. Of course, they shouldn't have the right to restrict them. But when you're living in a normal society, it could be that the benefit of the restrictions overrides the far-fetched fear of the restriction. So we don't have yet a conclusion.
Isn't there something written that if somebody takes my life, it's okay for me, because then I'll be with Hashem a lot faster, but I shouldn't take somebody else's life? So
you shouldn't protect yourself, you mean? We're going to get to self-defense in a few
why
minutes.
should I kill somebody?
We will get to self-defense in a few minutes. My point is,
What's that?
one thing is for sure, that from the story of the Philistines, we certainly cannot bring proof that we shouldn't restrict. I'm sorry. From the story of the Philistines, it would be more likely that the proof would be that restriction is no good. Because they can abuse it. Saul fought against it.
Well,
Let's go back in time, yeah?
can I just say, well, if there was too much restrictions, and even in our society, the bad people would, like
Well,
you
what do
said,
you mean there's too much? Who says?
if
Half
there,
the country says it's not too much.
if there is too much restriction in our current society, the good people wouldn't be able to protect themselves against the crazies
If
of the
they had
bad
guns in
people.
that elementary
So-
school, maybe all those little kinder kids wouldn't have gotten killed.
The NRAR.
If the people,
Teachers would have guns.
the teachers would have guns,
There
Right.
was-
security guards.
There was just a recent survey on public radio that violent crime and homicides are down in the country, except in the inner cities. A lot of it is due to what happened during Ferguson, because all these gangs went after the pharmaceutical companies, and there was like something like 100,000 opiates now on the street. And these people who are not used to selling are getting themselves killed and getting more violent because of that. But they just said certain major inner cities, violence has gone up, homicide has gone up, but the rest of the country has been consistently going down.
Vote for Trump.
Let's go here. Open democracy versus oppression. So, over here, the Philistine gun ban. They had a ban on guns. This there. It's open democracy. You can argue that open democracy is different versus when it's no democracy, maybe it could be better. You would restrict. On the other hand, you can argue government can degenerate, like we just said. Let's go back now, all the way to the beginning of time. We learned a story in the beginning of Genesis that Cain killed Abel, right? The first brothers. A few generations later, Torah tells us there was a man by the name of Lamech. This Lamech had 3 children. He had 2 wives and 3 children. First, he had 3 children. One of them was a shepherd. He taught him how to be a shepherd. The second one, he taught him how to create musical instruments and became a great musician. And then he had a third son, Tuval-Cain, which was a man that made weapons. He taught him how to make weapons, metals and things like that. And the Torah records a conversation that he had with his 2 wives. That is very vague. No one understands. It's hard to understand what this conversation was about. Let's see it in the text itself. Mike, how about text number 10a? Ada Boryava.
Good God. Enough worry about. He was the father of those who dwell in the tents and raise cattle. His brother name was Yabal. He was the father of all who played the harp and flute. Zillah too bore Tubal, who forged all kinds of tools out of bronze and iron. And Tubal, King's sister, was Nah. Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hearken to my voice, wives of Lamech with hammer work. Have I slain a man by wounding him, a child by striking?
So what's going on? What kind of conversation was it? So Nachmanides, one of the great commentators of the Torah, interprets it as follows. I'm going to read it. Mel, we'll do the next one. Lamech.
Lamech was very wise in many different areas of creative work. He taught one son hurry, the other music, and a third to manufacture and sharpen swords, pikes, spears, and other weapons. His wives were afraid that he would suffer divine punishment for bringing war and death to the world. They accused him of perpetuating the negative legacy of his ancestor Cain, the first murderer. He responded to them, unlike Cain, I have not slain a man by wounding him or a child by bruising him. God will not punish me as he did Cain, but surely protect me. His argument was that even without a sword or spear, one could kill by wounding and battering his victim, which is worse than dying by the sword. It is not the sword that kills, it is the manufacturer. Its manufacturer commits no sin.
This is an interesting piece of that. In other words, his wives are telling him, you taught the first 2 sons how to be a herdsman, how to be a musician. It's great, that's wonderful. But when you go and teach our son to go and be a creator of
An arms manufacturer.
arms manufacturer, right? What did you do? You're going to bring death to the world. You brought death to the world. You learned from your grandfather, Cain. He was a murderer himself. He killed his brother Abel. What did you do? So, Lamech said it's not the gun that kills, it's the person that kills, basically. He says, Cain didn't kill Abel. He didn't have a gun. He didn't have a sword. He didn't have anything. He had a stone. The rabbis told us it was a stone. Killed him with a stone. And they tell him, let me ask you, what's better? To get killed by a stone or to get killed by a sword? You know how many times you have to hit him over the head with that stone? A sword. So he's saying, on the contrary, man, you don't know that. I didn't bring any bad. I didn't kill anyone. What does this tell you? This sounds like the proponent of the NRA. Like if you're a lawyer for the NRA.
But it doesn't show that that was a Jewish or the
Oh,
Torah view on
the
it.
question is, that's the other side. The Torah tells us that, first of all, he's not the only opinion giver over here. His wife's also have an opinion. They said he did a terrible thing. And the Torah, although the Torah tells us that, gives the last word to Lemech, he doesn't say what their wives answered him. He kind of gives him his statement was a final statement in this conversation. But we certainly don't have a clear-cut who's right. Maybe the wives were right. Just he said what he said, the wife said what they said. So, we don't know.
With the rabbis.
It's left, the commentators just explained what the conversation between them was. They don't really get into who's right and who's wrong. So, the NRA can say, look, the Torah says that that's what he answered them, and there's no counter-argument. So fine, there's no reason to restrict it. Guns don't kill, it's people that kill. But there was another opinion there, so it's not interesting. It's an interesting commentary. Let's go to self-defense now. Still left, so you have two sides of it. Let's move on to self-defense, D. God tells Moses regarding the last war that he would fight before the Jews went into Israel. This was the war against the Midianites. A famous war, and it's in the book of Deuteronomy. And he tells them over there he should fight against the Midianites and destroy them. So the Midrash tells us the following. Text number 11. Carl, you want to read 11?
Assault the Midianites and strike them. Why? For they are assaulting you. From here the sages taught, if someone comes to kill you, you should rise first and kill him.
So first of all, over here we see that you have the self-defense is a Torah ideal. It's not only a right, it's actually an obligation. You must defend yourself against killing. You can't say, well, I don't want to kill, so I'll let him kill me. You don't have that right. You must kill him before he kills you. Yeah.
Aren't we also obliged to protect our neighbor in the same way?
Yeah. If you see someone pursuing you, maybe you have an obligation to kill the pursuer before he kills you. Yeah, that's true.
Sure he has a
Now, if you want to
Get right away. Go get him in the back.
which tells me,
He's to carry it.
okay, so you have the three sons, okay? Someone comes to kill you, arise first and kill him. How do you kill if you don't have a weapon? So you have to argue.
Which that brings us to on Shabbat. We should have something in case someone comes up to kill us.
Okay, so if there's a serious threat, but is there a serious threat everywhere? No, you can't say that living in Weston is a serious threat.
You can make that
Not yet.
Is this
You
also
can make that argument, that's
next
what we have
step,
to
what
do.
type of weapons? If you have to be able to defend yourself from someone that's going to kill you, it means that person also has a weapon. So you have to have something
You have to
more
have something
powerful than
comparable to that weapon. That's why they say you can't take away the assault rifles, the assault weapons, because the murderer, the bad guy's going to have it. You can't have me with a pistol when he has an assault weapon that he can shoot 30 rounds in 1 minute. I have to have the same capacity. So that's the other argument. But the first thing we see from is you have to protect yourself means you have to have a weapon.
Even on Shabbat?
Whenever it is. If you have a serious threat, on Shabbos, you gotta go, you have to
Rabbi,
defend.
I have a proposal for you. Why don't you put an AR-15 right up there?
But hold
Now,
on.
what's the thing? I didn't come to the conclusion.
The people that went to work on 9/11 didn't think that they had a threat when they got up and got dressed.
So you have to have reason. You have to go with reason. So you're saying that after 9/11, we're always in a major threat.
But even
How
if
many
you
times-
have guns
you
in
can
our
argue that.
weapons,
I'm not even
How many
telling
times
you.
has B'nai Aviv synagogue been closed down for Hebrew school because some of bomb threats in the past 10 years?
Well, they weren't real.
Oh, yeah.
Why do we have a cop outside?
I remember
No,
calls
they
that
weren't real. There was no bomb. It was just a skill.
Yeah, but a
Threat, the phone, to
Well,
someone's phone is harassment. That's more harassment than
the
anything
threat's
else.
real though.
Well, one second. First thing is we see that you have to be able to protect yourself means you have to have a weapon. With a chair and a ball, you can't protect yourself. If someone comes in with a weapon, you're going to pick up this computer and throw it at him. You need to have a compatible way of protecting yourself. Now, it's also true that when you have weapons, it is a great deterrent. By the way, if you take a look at the language over here, the rabbis say, and I want you to pay attention to the nuances over here. Habol laharlicha, someone that comes to kill you, hashkim laharli. It doesn't say hashkim veharli. It doesn't say get up and kill him. It says get up to kill him. That's a very interesting language. What the meaning of the rabbis is. They want you to have a weapon before you kill him, so that he knows that you have a weapon, so he doesn't kill you. It doesn't come to you to begin with. It doesn't say get only after the guy comes, you should then kill him. You should have the weapon where he sees, wait a minute, this guy has a weapon that could kill me, I'm going to leave him alone, I won't even go that close to him. So that's already a step further.
I'm going to the gun range right after this class.
No.
I
On
did,
the house?
We got one of
like,
those.
I'm like, what's his name? Fiddle on the Roof. What's the
Yeah.
on the other hand?
Yeah.
There's another hand there. Let's see.
gun sale, that's what
On the other hand,
let's all go to the next.
it could be that the rabbis use the line, very interesting. Habol for someone that's coming to kill you. I mean, the threat is real. It's not a license all of a sudden that everyone that you live in Weston with peace, everyone has a weapon because someone might come. No, that's not the language of the rabbi. The rabbis was clear. Someone that comes to kill you, hashkim lahargeh. So, in other words, the language lends itself to believe that the threat has to be more immediate.
But how do you know the threat's